Who's telling the truth here? The apostles that walk with Jesus Christ, or the critics that claim that Jesus is no more than a copy of pagan gods like Mithras and Horus? If the critics are right, then Christianity is no more than recycled mythology. But if the disciples are right, then Jesus is the living Son of God and he demands your response. Wes Huff and Michael Knowles are about to debunk this lazy myth, and in the end I'm going to show you why this copycat claim really falls apart when you open your eyes.
That our Lord is actually just a copy or a composite of pagan gods, Mithras, Horus, Dionysus, I don't know, whoever else. What do you make of? Is our Lord just a facsimile of a pagan demon or something?
Yeah, well, the simple answer is no. But the longer answer is that in order to establish that, you really need to show, once again, causation, right? Not just correlation. We can find correlative patterns all over the place. We could pick on them and capitalize on them. I am using a microphone. Michael, you are using a microphone. I am in an office studio. Michael, you are in an office studio. I bet you have a laptop in your room. You know, we're both wearing shirts and pants. You know, interesting.
You don't know that for a fact,
Michael,
Wes. You know about the shirt.
True.
You don't know that for a fact.
We don't know that about either of us. Let's just assume that we're both wearing pants. We both are drinking from tumblers, mugs, you know. So we could draw all these correlations and say, well, Wes Huff doesn't actually exist. He is just a copy of the far more popular, far more influential Michael Knowles. He's just a Protestant version, and the Protestants wanted their own Michael Knowles, and so they created this fabrication.
People say this all the time. I see it all over the internet. They say this Wes Huff, and he's got that Jordan Peterson accent on there to make him even more popular. Yeah, I know.
That's right. Yeah. Take all the best bits. Okay, and so but that's not a coherent argument. It's just correlations. It's if you want to find parallels, you can find parallels all over the place. I've even seen some as simple as Horus gets in a boat and Jesus gets in a boat. Gotcha, Christian. And so we really need to show causative links. And a lot of these really fall apart when you start looking at the specifics. You know, okay, what's going on with Mithras? Was Mithras virgin born? Well, all of the stories that we have say, you know, either nothing about his birth or that he came from a rock. Well, not really what I consider a virgin, birth. Or, you know, he was created out of nothing from Zahora Mazda. Okay, well, you know, that's not what I believe about, you know, the physicality of the incarnation. Right. So it's in the specifics where these things die, in that you can find all sorts of parallels. But once again, Texas sharpshooter fallacy. If we want to paint those targets around those closest clusters, we can do that, but it's going to ignore all of the shots that are the hundreds of more potential shots that are all over the other side of the barn, as opposed to the 5 shots that I'm drawing my target around.
Only yet, guys, I have something important, really important you must know. Have you ever noticed how the most persistent myths about Christianity often claim to expose some hidden truth that would supposedly undermine the entire faith? The internet is full of memes and videos claiming Jesus is just a recycled version of Horus, Mithras, Dionysus, or whatever pagan god the skeptics claim. The claim is everywhere, but the evidence not so much. Now, let's be real for a second here. If you were a first century Jewish person trying to start a religious movement, would you really borrow from pagan religions that your entire culture considered idolatrous? That would be me like trying to win over Star Wars fans by making a video full of Star Trek references. It just doesn't make sense. These early Christians were devout Jews who took their Hebrew scriptures seriously. Remember Moses with the golden calf and how he got angry and broke the 10 commandments? Yeah, the Torah literally forbade adopting practices from surrounding pagan nations. So the idea that they would say, you know what would make our message really appealing? Let's mix in some Egyptian mythology. Well, this is just historically absurd. Let's look at Mithras, for example. Supposedly born of a virgin just like Jesus, except when you actually read Mithraic text, you discover he was born from a rock. Yes. And last time I checked, rocks aren't virgins. They're rocks. And here's something you might not know. The majority of actual historians and scholars, whether secular, Christian, or whatever, they don't support this Jesus is a copy theory. Even Bart Ehrman, who is no friend of traditional Christianity, he calls many of these supposed parallels, I quote, bogus, or greatly exaggerated. That's right, even the skeptical scholars think this theory is sketchy. In fact, many of these supposed source myths either came after Christianity was already established or weren't even known in first century Judea. That would be like claiming I plagiarized tomorrow's newspaper. So when Paul preached in Athens, surrounded by temples to Greek gods, he didn't say, hey guys, Jesus is just like your gods. No, the Greeks actually thought the resurrection was weird and foreign to their worldview. Some even sneered at him. Not exactly the reaction you'd expect if he was just rehashing similar stories. So the irony here is the historical evidence for Jesus and his life teachings and death and resurrection is far stronger than the evidence for these supposed pagan parallels, yet which one gets dismissed as a myth? And you know what's most telling? Horus worship is now a dead religion. Compare that to Christianity, which continues to thrive worldwide. Now, why is that the case? Because the gospel accounts were rooted in recent events and eyewitness testimony that had persuasive power that these mere myths lack. Sometimes what we call skepticism is actually just skepticism aimed in only one direction. We demand extraordinary evidence for the gospel while accepting these pagan parallel claims based on nothing more than watching a YouTube video or in some internet meme. So maybe it's time we applied the same historical standard to both. If you enjoyed this video, please follow Daily Pursuit of Truth and let me know what you guys think in the comment below.